Hello, and welcome to the Plastic Pressgang podcast, a sometimes monthly historicals podcast looking at sort of the more casual side of historicals gaming. I'm Eric, my pronouns are he, him, and joining me is...
I'm Calvin, and I use he, him pronouns as well.
So it's been a while since we've recorded, so I figured the first thing we should do is say where we've been. And the answer to that is things took a turn. I had an extremely busy travel schedule, essentially starting in August and never stopping until the middle of the middle of December, wherein I logged the better part of like 80,000 frequent flyer miles, and just generally have been wildly unavailable. Hence the sort of very, very slow cadence of recording things is we were off to a good start this year, and then life sort of dealt me a blow. It's been a good year professionally, but sort of a terrible year on the hobby side of things. We'll talk about that a bit. Calvin, how have you been?
Shit went sideways in the second half of the year, but I did get a lot of hobby stuff done. There were some things in my own personal life and kind of mental health took a turn, but we're back on track.
So new year, old podcast. Hopefully we will be coming out with these more, but we thought we'd get it off on the right foot. So what are we working on right now, Calvin? You go ahead and go first. This makes for great radio, but you've got stuff in your hands currently. What are those?
I just got my hands on the Woolard Games Metal Gebrigsjäger. For some reason, I've always had a fascination with mountain troops and the weird, not quite special forces, but like the specialized forces. And so I got them. I also got some commandos for use because I realized I didn't have any and I wanted some. And then also in less historicals, I have Rohan. I have so much Rohan. And I'm probably going to end up having more because Lord of the Rings showed back up and a bad ex that's just like, oh, I can't quit you.
So we're talking about that a little bit on the other podcast I host, Lost in the Nails. We were talking a little bit about this idea of like sort of what counts as historicals, because we have a historical square on our hobby bingo card this year. And I feel like the Middle-earth strategy battle game sort of qualifies in that historicals vibe sense, where like you should have a nice board, your stuff should be painted, this mission should be narrative. No, it doesn't matter that hobbits are garbage. You should take hobbits.
Because hobbits are cool as hell.
And
they can all throw rocks.
I do remember very early on, I think it was the Fellowship of the Ring set, was sort of my first wargaming mechanic I was genuinely in love with, which was, if folks remember back in the Middle-earth strategy battle games, heroes had, I think it was Might and Fate, or something like Power.
Might, Will, Fate.
Yeah, Might, Will, and Fate. And what I always loved about it is in the Fellowship set, Boromir has an incredible amount of Might, which means he fights real good, and 0 Fate, which means he can escape no dangerous situations. He's a cruise missile who will die. On the other hand, Merry and Pippin don't have a lot in the Might department, but have a huge amount of Fate. Basically, hobbits get out of sticky situations all the time. I remember loving that mechanic. This is also the game where my brother managed to reinvent the pike phalanx, thanks to Urukai rules and supporting model rules. He just realized that, like, oh, a pike block is how these should run.
Yes.
And it's fair enough. So yeah, looking forward to that game. On my end, we are starting a Baron's War campaign up for our club. So I am working on the first of what will hopefully be 3 forces for that. This is my sort of garrison force, sort of not mounted troops, a lot more sort of what you'd expect defending a town. I'm making slow progress on that, but I've got 3 guys done right now, which is exciting given it is January 2nd. So yeah, that's what I've been working on right now. And also, while not hobby progress related, I'm working on a massive reorganization of my office/workspace so that I can actually get things done and know where things are. Like, I have unearthed projects that I'm like, oh, that's where that went. Okay. And like I have found out I don't need to order grass tufts for another like 6 years.
Wonderful.
Because I just keep losing track of my grass tufts and being like, I don't have any grass tufts. I need to order more. And the answer is they were all gathering in one quiet corner. Now I have lots of grass.
Excellent. And also for the audience to note, I also am in this Baron's War campaign. However, I'm done with the models.
Yes, per usual. I have started thinking about painting models, and Calvin is done.
They're even based and varnished.
I'm so proud of you. So proud. That is a tip for any of our listeners who are coming from the wonderful world of plastics and starting to work with metal historicals. You gotta varnish your stuff. Otherwise, it chips. And chipping sucks because repairing chips is awful.
Yeah, I need to repair Ivan.
Is he chipped?
Yeah, like the whole crew for Ivan Svetlana, because he's been out and about a bunch. He's gotten chipped a bunch just from living in the box, which is a nice little segue to the games that we played recently.
Yeah, so recent games. Calvin, a member of our club named Gemma, and I played a 3-player Pikeman's Lament game that was primarily focused around essentially raiding a small hapless German town for supplies. That game, Calvin, it was your second activation roll. Rolled on the bad table. What happened is that unit immediately retreats. Unfortunately, that unit, which was a veteran pike block with his commander, was on the edge of the board. So they went ahead and just dipped out of the battle. We decided that what that was is Gemma's army, which are narratively our club loner army is a group of Spaniards, had bribed his commander to maybe be elsewhere. So the Swedes and the Spanish primarily fought over some supply tokens. The Imperials managed to make off with one in a sort of desperate, this will hinge on a couple die rolls, whether you make it out of here runs, but they did make it. And then we played a second game, which was essentially the Swedes, having gotten wind of this bribe, double backed around and ambushed the carts carrying the gold. This is the type of game that my army works really well at doing.
Yeah.
My Swedish raiders are fast, but don't stick around long. So grab some carts and go is the perfect sort of mission for them. Whereas, as we have discovered from some previous games, like storm the fortified position is a horrible idea.
Especially because of my predilection for the way I build armies of just like, I like castles.
Yeah. On the other hand, Calvin's army is slow and not particularly effective on the move. But if you can have them dig into a fortified position, it's a bad day for whoever's got to go root them out. So the Swedes managed to take off with 2 of the 3 treasure carts. And importantly, this means Major Skarsgård, my officer for our sort of informal campaign, has now more than 61 experience points, which in Pikeman's Lament means he has been promoted to colonel. And in what I think is one of the coolest bits of sort of very casual game design and game mechanics, being promoted to colonel means he's now in command of a regiment. Pikeman's Lament is not a game about regiments, so he has been promoted out of the game and must now be replaced by some new officer who I will have to come up with. And more importantly, this gives me the freedom, and I no longer have the superstition that if I do this, he will immediately die, of creating him as a unit commander for other sort of pike and shot related games, including Pike and Shot, Push of Pike, or whatever Warlord is calling the epic Pike and Shot game, never mind the Matchlocks, the upcoming Two Fat Lardies in the buff game. Basically, he's now a commander. So I'm going to work on making that model. What else did we play recently, Calvin?
We did, let's see, there was another Pikeman's Lament game before that where we learned storming a fortified position with a cannon in it ends badly for the people storming that position. And then we also, I'm trying to think of what we did before that. Oh, we played with my Winter American, like my Battle of the Bulge set, which was great fun because we got to turn a lot of Nazis into mincemeat. Yeah.
So Calvin has been working on a sort of narrative starter armies, I think would be the fair way to put this.
Yeah.
And a sort of a scenario of during sort of the Battle of the Bulge, a German sort of offensive trying to push some Americans out of a town. We were sort of playtesting the scenario and things like that. We should play it again because what actually happened was I have ruthlessly accurate artillerymen. And
no matter who you're playing.
Yeah, regardless of who I'm playing, Allied artillery is really good in the hands of Eric. And so I believe both of my mortars zeroed a unit the very first turn in that game and just destroyed it.
Yeah.
Like a good quarter of Calvin's infantry was just combat ineffective the first time I rolled dice. And that carried on from there. So the Germans got a little bit hammered. I also got extremely lucky. I had a Wolverine scout car that dodged like a shot from a Panther, a Panzerfaust. I hit his Stug, which also could have killed it with an artillery round. It was just a bad scene for the Germans, which is never a bad thing because I do love killing some Nazis.
Also,
so that was
considering the actual conflict that's based on is the Battle of Elsenborn Ridge, otherwise known as the one part of the Battle of the Bulge where the Allies had their shit together and like held up a German advance for like 3 weeks until they just went, fine, we're leaving.
Yeah, see, there you go. We're just sticking to the narrative.
Yeah.
So that was a fun game, and that was a good introduction to Bolt Action 3. I've played a whopping one game of Bolt Action 2, so it was a good introduction to the third edition of what is arguably the most popular historical game produced.
Yeah, and to slightly go later, it's a good game.
Yeah. So from a gaming perspective, it's been a good year. From a hobby perspective, for me at least, it's been sort of a disaster. And really the idea behind this particular episode is a retrospective on that, to sort of look at what we did, how we did it, and what we're hoping to do in 2025.
So to start with, Eric, tell us about your 2024.
All right. So this was, like I said, a rough year. I graduated 3 students. We got in October of 2023 a very, very large grant. So actually doing most of that work is 2024, etc. So this was not a great year, especially the back half. Essentially what happened was for the first couple months, I kept going, oh, I don't have to do anything. It'll be fine. I've got plenty of time before Nova. I'll get stuff done this summer. I frantically did some stuff in the summer and then was like, okay, we're going to carry that into the fall. And then immediately didn't carry it into the fall. On the plus side, I did join the Goonhammer Historicals team. I am on that site as variously Variance Hammer Eric, VH Eric, or just Eric. I've been sort of trying to figure out what my identity there is, especially as I've started updating Variance Hammer less. But that has been really fun. It's a very engaging group of people to work with. They are really fun. It's a very cool group of people. It has been bad for hobby ADD because every time someone comes up with something, I'm like, oh, that seems neat. In addition to that, I did finish for Nova because I wanted to get this done. Nova had a Mordheim event, which is, for those of you who are not old, Mordheim was a Games Workshop specialist game about a city in the Warhammer Old World that got hit by a comet, and a comet made of essentially uranium. And we're all running around trying to gain control of this city. My particular band is trying to lock the warp stone away where people can't get it. Other groups are trying to steal it for their own nefarious purposes. So I played, they had a sort of 3-game campaign for that one day. I desperately wanted to play in this, and so did paint a full force for it. A little gang, the Sisters of Sigmar, which is sort of a proto-Battle Sisters-esque, pretty close combat, very hammer-heavy army. That I have had those models since I was in high school. They are, I believe, older than Calvin, we figured out. Yeah, they're older than Calvin. And I finally sat down. I have been intimidated to paint these forever. Like, when I got them, I was intimidated to paint them. I have been scared of them ever since. I was finally like, okay, look, we gotta go. And so I painted them up, and they were great fun. I'm actually really pleased with how they look, and they performed very well. Generally speaking, Nova was a blast this year. I sort of did the full Grognard approach to that. I played Adeptus Titanicus, Horus Heresy Centurion, Mordheim. There was an Inquisitor 54 game, and I was like, I'm never going to get to play Inquisitor, so I'll do that. That was amazing. And
I feel like that was the highlight of your event.
I think it was the highlight of my event. I have schemes around that. It is one of those few events that I went out of and was like, I have ideas because of this. Other things I've worked on, I've done some Cruel Seas stuff, sort of tinkering with that. I want to get back to that. And then really a huge amount of what we've been doing is getting the club's historical terrain collection in good working order. So we had some stuff sort of lingering from folks who I'm not really sure who or what had this, but we didn't really have coherent sets. We have tons of 40K terrain. The utility of it varies based on how Games Workshop is envisioning terrain in any given edition. But we have lots of that. We have lots of Age of Sigmar terrain, but we wanted to get some good historical terrain. So I've been 3D printing tremendous amounts of stuff. We started focusing on sort of Western Europe in the sort of prototypical French village that can work anywhere from Napoleonics to the Second World War to probably the Cold War goes hot. Sort of quintessential France and parts of Germany. Started working on that. More recently, have been working on some sort of 15 millimeter terrain and some more specialist stuff. We do have terrain for cruel seas, so there are rocks you can run into and lighthouses and whatnot. A lot of things have been actually sort of planning that out, printing it, assembling it. One thing I've noticed about historical 3D printing is that the designers are often, and I think this is a sort of commendable idea, are often much more interested in the historical accuracy of the buildings they're making and not so much the printability. So whereas like a Mordheim table or a Warhammer Fantasy Old World table, those buildings will be eminently printable. The historical ones tend to involve a lot more support structures and gluing things together. And at one point, for example, the platform for the train station I printed is about 3 feet wide. And so some of those pieces need to be glued together, and that involves using polyurethane glue and developing some sort of suspension rig so the polyurethane glue can drip down and not ruin my kitchen counters and have my wife be very upset with me. A lot of stuff like that I've been working on that we've gotten, I think, to a pretty decent place in terms of our historicals collection. We had a recent planning day with Calvin, myself, and a fellow in our club named Russell, who is essentially a project manager at heart, to come up with what we're doing this year. And we're starting to get into the specialists. Can we do North Africa terrain? Okay, when we say we want bocage, how much bocage do we actually need? Things like that. And we've been working on that. And then actually trying to get some of this stuff painted, which Calvin knocked out 2 buildings yesterday. So yay for that. Yeah. And then as we sort of alluded to, a lot of actual gaming, because essentially what would happen for a lot of the stuff is I'd fly back into town on Thursday. I'd be tired. And what I wanted to do on Friday night was game, not paint, especially not paint alone in my room. So I would go out and actually game with folks, which was awesome, but did mean most of my hobby time this year was spent gaming. Kelvin, on the other hand, got a lot of stuff painted. Why don't you tell us about it?
So if you were over on the Lost the Nails Discord, you saw me fly through the hobby bingo, because I just kind of never stopped painting things. I did a lot of skirmish-sized projects, so not as much rank and flank, but a lot of 30 to 50 man armies. Whether it's something for colonial stuff. Well, actually, that's another thing. Is I've become at peace with my idea of really loving asymmetrical and colonial warfare of so many kinds. Whether it's Afghanistan, no, not that time, the other time. No, not that time, the other time. Or South Africa, or even when I went over to Star Wars, after about 20 minutes of looking at my list ideas I read, I'm like, wait, I did it again. And so that's just kind of where I've landed. I've really started to love themed forces. And by that, I don't mean specifically they're for this battle specifically. It's it's a winter army, or it's a desert army, or it's a swamp army, etc., etc., etc. I also kind of really fell more away from Warhammer 40k and Warhammer Age of Sigmar as games I don't really want to play with that much. But then all the games around it, like Heresy and Necromunda and Lord of the Rings, I really fell back into. Whether that's through creepy mutated gene stealers showing up in a corner, or through hey Calvin, are you gonna redo your entire Rohan army? Yes. I was actually really excited about. Like, their projects, I want to do this. Got the models, did the project, said I'm done. Whether that's British in Afghanistan, or probably the biggest example of that would be, I don't know, probably my Sengoku period Japanese stuff I did, where it's just like, I got the models, busted them out like in a week, and went, we're good. We're done here. And I've been basing more because bullying works.
Yeah, so the Lost the Nails Discord, again, which I will mention, has essentially been bullying Calvin that a bunch of the stuff he claimed was done was not done because it wasn't based. As much as I hate to say it, bullying works, and essentially an entire Discord gently mocking Calvin has gotten Calvin to do some actually very cool basing.
Yeah.
And this does tie into one of the things that I think we did well this year that I wasn't expecting to do, was sort of collaborative projects, where for club armies especially, I would build the army, I'd hand it over to Calvin to paint it, and then he'd hand it back to me and I'd base it. And now that doesn't have to happen. Calvin can base his own things. Super excited about this because from my personal perspective, basing is the part of the hobby I'm good at. At 1 year at the, God, what was it? Warzone Atlanta. My Elder Army was getting paint judged, and I knew I wasn't going to win. I'm not that good a painter. The paint judge was like, damn, your bases are on point, though. And I was like, I'm going to hold that in my heart forever. Yeah. And so basing is where I tend to go a little bit extra. So I'm super proud of Calvin for rising to the occasion and doing some basing.
Speaking of collaborative projects, we actually did some fun stuff together.
Yeah, so we had sort of two big projects this year, and I've sort of now translated this into what if we try to do two big sort of public projects every year. The first one is What a Stormtrooper, which, Calvin, do you want to talk about the sort of birth of that project and what we were trying to do with it?
We wanted a game we could take to a convention that was eye-catching, quick to learn, and would get people into trying out gaming in general, like wargaming in general. So we took the wonderful Two Fat Lardies rule set, What a Cowboy, and we went, what if we just spray paint Star Wars on top of this? And it worked. It worked really well. It was a really quick way to get multiple people showing up. We talked about this in one of our previous episodes when we talked about it right after we ran it. Even since then, it's just kept showing up as what are we going to do? Oh, we can do What a Stormtrooper. Or it's come back up. I actually, at one point, my brother and his wife came up to visit, and I asked Eric to leave the models up at the club, and we played it. And neither of them had played a war game before. And about 10 minutes in, my brother had picked it up immediately, and his wife had picked it up immediately, and we had a good time with no preparation, essentially.
Yeah, we've also another member of our club is sort of interested in technology and its applications to things. So there's apparently a technology sort of expo addition to a music fest down in Boise that we put in an application for booth 4. And our essential push to that was everything in What a Stormtrooper is 3D printed. So talking about wargaming and 3D printing and how technology has honestly really changed the face of wargaming, especially in sort of the independent scene. What a Stormtrooper is a game that I think really has a lot of legs to it for a very, very casual, very easy to pick up game. There's still stuff I want to do with it. I definitely have some STLs of but what if I did these guys instead? So I think that'll be something that has some legs. And the second thing we did was it was around June 6th. Not actually June 6th because I have commitments that day, but it was the anniversary of D-Day, and we decided to have a D-Day day where we did sort of not a campaign, but what happens on some tables is affected by what happens on other tables, where we had a Cruel Seas game going on, a Bolt Action game going on, and a O200 Hours game going on for 2 different sessions. And that, I think, again, was a huge push to get terrain done, or at least printed. And I think the boards look really good. I think the boards will look fantastic when all of that stuff is painted. We have some genuine centerpiece pieces, some great sort of scatter, and we managed to put those games together. And then we had folks from our club play, and I think that went really well. in terms of getting people playing, used to what we were doing, etc. And we have then decided to carry that forward, which we'll talk a little bit about next year.
Yeah. Another thing I'll bring up is that we played 6 games of historicals, and only 2 of them were bolt action. Which I call that a win in our book.
I was very proud of being able to play 6 games of World War II historicals, and only 2 of them were indeed bolt action. The folks who played Cruel Seeds seemed to have a really good time. I mostly sort of GM'd the 0200 hours table because that needs a little bit more shepherding, but that ended up having some really great cinematic moments to it and things like that. I was really happy with how that day went.
And speaking of games we did, do you want to just run through kind of what we did?
So this is Calvin's idea, because one of the nice parts about historicals is the number of sort of flexible or miniatures agnostic rule sets or things like that means you can play a lot of different games. Like there are very few people, especially outside Warlord games, who are like, no, I only play X. So I thought we'd run through the rule sets we played this year. Why don't we just alternate through them? Calvin, do you want to start?
Daniel Mercy. All praise be his name. We played so many of his Rampant rule sets. Whether it was Lion Rampant to do 100 Years War, Pikeman's Lament, which is probably one of our most played games of the entire year. Heck, we did a bunch of stuff with The Men Who Would Be Kings, the colonial rule set, because that's my personal favorite. Tomorrow we're going to be looking at Rebels and Patriots, which is the black powder thing. And then also, I do have Xenos Rampant ideas, but that's for a later time.
Yeah. And someone on the Goonhammer Discord referred to Lion Rampant as a good game to get a bit pissed and play with your buddies. And I think that's a good summation of it. They're light. There's not a lot of cognitive overhead to them. There's still a lot of really interesting tactics that emerge from how the units interact and the stat lines and pushing your luck and things like that. When I'm tired and just want to play a game, at this point, Daniel Mercy is a pretty good bet for what I want to play. On the other hand, we've played a number of games developed by Rick Priestley. We've played some bolt action and things like that. We've played some black powder. I have thought a lot about Hail Caesar and Pike and Shot, and I continue to have conflicted thoughts about these systems. They are popular for a reason. They're good systems. They work well. There are some things I don't like about them. I think I will like them more in smaller scales. I'm really interested in playing the epic scale stuff, because one of my complaints about it is there's very little actually maneuvering. And I think that more has to do with people trying to cram tons of rank and flank models onto 6x4 tables that are at 28 millimeter.
Yeah.
And if you don't have any room, you don't have any room to maneuver.
Yeah. If you're not the Perry brothers.
Yeah. If you're not the Perry brothers. Whereas if you're playing we have 4x8 tables. And if we're playing at their epic scale, which is, I think, 13 millimeters, you have a lot more room to move and actually turn a flank and things like that. We've been sort of flirting with those. And then we played a lot of another fairly popular game, one that Goonhammer is in love with, Saga.
Yeah, which I bounced off it a bit. It doesn't quite click in my brain as well. Eric is in danger of owning half a dozen armies. However, I am giving it another shot. I'm going to see if Age of Magic does any better with dwarves, which has made Eric very happy for many reasons.
Yeah. So the spoiler there is I own a number of STLs for Dwarven Terrain that I had resigned myself to never actually using because they were bought for some people who are no longer in the area for projects that they were sort of flirting with. And I was like, oh, well, but it's cool and I want to support these people. And then Calvin said, hey, do you have any Dwarven Terrain? And I was like, oh, my sweet summer child. You can play a full vertical battle in the gatehouse of a Dwarven Forge levels of Dwarven Terrain. Oh yes. Poor Calvin is going to get 3 tables worth of Dwarven Terrain. I really enjoy Saga. I think, Calvin, you should try playing the Anglo-Saxons again. Having played them, I got some insight into how they work, and I understand them a little better. But I really like Saga. One of the things I really like about Saga is you're done pretty fast. And there's a lot of armies that can be essentially purchased with, hey, I bought a bag of Vikings from Victrix, and that's a full army. There are several articles on Goonhammer about doing that. I wrote one about the Anglo-Saxons. Somebody else wrote one about the Vikings.
And if you look at the Anglo-Saxon one, it was painted by me.
Yeah, if you look at the Anglo-Saxon one, those are our club figures. I really like Saga. I think the idea of the boards modifying how the underlying armies work is a really clever idea. And so I've enjoyed it a lot. And it's one of those things that I'm like, yeah, I can do an Irish warband. Yeah, I could do this too. And the nice part about it is a bunch of them you can then adapt to Lion Rampant or another game as you want. We also tried on the What an X front. We tried What a Tanker. Calvin, how did that go?
It went well for me.
Yeah. This was one of those games. I am often very skeptical of people who were like, my dice were cold and that's why I lost. Because that's not how probability works. Except hear me out. My dice were cold and that's why I lost.
And mine were hot.
Yeah. Calvin was doing real well. I had a Panther sort of dead to rights with a Sherman Firefly and didn't do so much as scratch the paint. It was just my stuff couldn't hit and Calvin's hit hard and where it needed to be. And eventually I ended up retreating off the board, having done absolutely nothing.
You didn't even damage the little 35T that I had with me for points.
Yeah, essentially I had a Sherman Firefly and a Sherman. Calvin had a Panther and a reserve training tank from 1938. And I couldn't even hurt that. It was just a fiasco. So yeah, that was What a Tanker. I did, however, really enjoy the game. And so would like to revisit that again to sort of have a better idea of how this goes if I don't sort of trip on the starting line.
Yeah.
But that was a lot of fun.
Also, on the note of tank games, we did look at Achtung Panzer. It made us want to play What a Tanker instead.
Achtung Panzer seems very complicated and very fussy. And also not terribly well supported by Warlord right now. So anything about that is sort of on hold. Speaking of Warlord games, we also played some Cruel Seas, as mentioned during D-Day Day. We sort of GM'd too. We've also played some games. My opinion of that game is it's a lovely game that could very much use a second edition to clean some stuff up. There's some rules that sort of need to decide if they want realism or cinema and just pick one or the other. There's some weirdnesses, like aircraft in that game primarily do damage by dropping bombs instead of strafing tiny boats with machine guns and cannons, which is how they actually threatened those particular boats. So there's some weirdness to them, but it's a fun game. It's a sort of light and easy game. It always ends up with some narrative fun. I have some models for a Club Loner army that's some Italians, and then I've got my Irish, which is just basically the Royal Navy with a different coat of paint. And then, Calvin, you've got Germans
and I've got British.
I'm
looking at Americans as soon as they give me some more to get with my Americans.
The US versus Japan side of that game is not as well developed. It is funny when you look at it, especially with the small specialists, we've printed this in resin, or this is genuinely just a 3D printed model. There are all the minutiae of the various small boats of the Battle for the North Sea, including harbor launches. And then there's I suppose the Americans had PT boats. There's just not enough there. I'm hoping that will change. For games that I'm hoping will not change and are well supported and I love to death, Silver Bayonet. Silver Bayonet might be genuinely my favorite historicals game. I love it. I have never had a bad game of Silver Bayonet. It is good in multiplayer. It is good as a solo game. There are very different vibes to that. I wrote the review for Goonhammer for the Canada supplement. The Canada supplement was great. They've got an Italy one that is much more You're not going to be able to shoot your way out of everything because essentially there is pervasive spooky fog. They are doing one on the island of Great Britain, which I am hyped about, simply because like Fairfolk versus rifles seems like great fun.
Oh yeah.
And so like for that, I may both paint my current unit and then pick up one of the War Games Atlantic legally distinct from Richard Sharp sets and just have a what if all 95th rifles.
Well, I mean, I have an extra sprue of them.
I mean, we'll talk. But I continue to love Silver Bayonets. It is being produced. It's well supported. The models that come out for it, I have some of them. So one of the nice parts is like you can get away with just Napoleonic figures, or North Star produces figures for the game, and they are nice and characterful and decent metal models, and I like them. And so I think Silver Bayonet, there's an Egypt supplement where you get to do spooky Egypt things. It's a great game. I love it. Which brings us to the second skirmish level solo capable gothic horror historicals game, which is a strange thing to be able to say, but is awesome.
There's two of them.
Devilry Afoot. I also wrote the review for this for Goodhammer based on some games Calvin and I played. And Calvin, what was your impression of this system?
Yeah, like it kind of just slid right off me. Like, it's not that I disliked the game we played. Like, we actually had a really fantastic time. We were also a bit pissed.
My thoughts on Devilry Afoot are there are some things it does very well. Environment, and it turns out Calvin and I did have a bad series of rolls for one thing. We're like, oh yeah, this goes poorly if you roll exactly like Calvin and Eric did and get spammed by baddies. I think the key with Devilry Afoot is it's a good game. It's not yet great, but it's a good game.
Flavor.
Yeah, I found the environmental aspects really appealing, like whether your guy has a torch or not matters, things like that. I think the primary problem with it is because you have so few models and the chances of success are actually pretty low in that game, it can often feel like some of your stuff just did nothing. And that can often be very frustrating. The co-op nature of it also means like you have your figures, Calvin has his figures, there's the baddies, and you sort of end up sort of co-managing everything, and I thought that was hard to keep track of. I think it would ironically be better with more people. So you could just be like, this is your witch hunter.
Yeah.
I think that would be a little better because the witch hunters are a little bit more granular than Devilry Afoot. We didn't explain what this is. Devilry Afoot is basically what if the Puritan witch hunters were right? Like, what if there are witches, they are out to get you, they have made pacts with the devil, and you should go fight them. I think it's a really fun game. I think as a con game where someone is running the baddies and you can just assign people, here are your witch hunters, I think it's great. Partially because it can be played on a 3x3 table. So like put your terrain and your models in a really useful box, take it to the con, play a game, show people how it works. Feels like a really good way to get like people who mostly play RPGs into historicals. I think it's a fun game, but I think Silver Bayonet's better.
Yeah, and which is why you're going to be doing your like Silver Pike.
Yeah, I want to work on a 30 Years War and English Civil War adaptation of Silver Bayonet. So speaking of things that I would call good but not great, but very popular, we played the new Bolt Action.
It's Bolt Action. It's kind of like Hollywood World War II. It's still that. It's if you played second edition, it's very similar to that. It does the job, and it's fun.
I think a couple things to note about it. I often see people get really upset when you refer to it as like the World War II 40K. I don't actually think that's a bad summation of things, nor do I think that is a condemnation of the system. I think it's popular, it's accessible, it's platoon level, and wherever you go, somebody probably plays it, is a good testament for a game. I enjoyed it a lot. I think there are some things about it I don't necessarily like, but it does do a good Saving Private Ryan, the movie, the game. It's fun. I'm a little hesitant about how it seems like it'll be a little bit more vehicle heavy this edition, which concerns me. I am mostly dragging my feet because they haven't put out the army books yet. They've got Germany out. And they are, I believe America is next and coming soon.
Yeah, America is like end of January, I think.
Yeah. And then we're not supposed to see Britain for a while.
Yeah, until like probably April is going to be my guess.
And all of my bolt action stuff is British. And from talking to folks at this point, none of the British things I have work particularly well based on the lists in the book. So I am a little bit dragging my feet, which also I don't paint fast. So the smart person would be painting now, but I'm not gonna, because I usually need some sort of excitement to motivate painting. But that's okay. But like the game I played had a ton of fun. And honestly, on any given Friday, if you were like, hey, I want to play Bolt Action, you want to play with me? Yeah.
Yeah. Like it's a game that neither of us is going to say no to. Like,
yeah. I will say I do like the new cover save mechanic.
Oh yeah, new cover save is sick. And speaking of like games that we're always happy to like jam for no good reason, 0200 Hours that we mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
Like we enjoyed it.
0200 Hours is a great game. I think if you're looking for that cinematic sneaking into a Nazi base to blow up a train, etc. type thing, it's really great. Again, it does a really good job with atmosphere. On the D-Day day, the second sort of board I set up had a intersection with a street light, and that was like a genuinely dangerous place for the British commandos to try to be. And there was a lot of like sneaking about, and then like, okay, on 3, we all bash up at the windows and unload on the hapless German sentries because we need to basically knock them out in one turn or we're in trouble. Somebody snuck around and like captured a German officer unawares, and then it turns out dragging an unwilling prisoner back across a river takes a long ass time. I think 0200 Hours is a great game. I have more stuff for it that I really do want to paint because I think we've got a lot of stuff there. I think for my great alternate history Irish, a lot of 0200 Hours with Irish commandos are going to end up being played. I just think it's a really great game, and I am excited to play more of it. I am excited to sort of think about how we can modify it and expand it. It's just really good.
I think you described it as it's less of a game against the other person and more collaborative storytelling.
Yeah, it's definitely like, oh man, that's so cool. It sort of gives the same vibe as like if you play Adeptus Titanicus. It is always fun when a Titan goes up, even if it's yours, to find out what happens on the reactor table. Similarly, it's so exciting to be like, all right, now we're going to try to do the thing. We're going to try to get across the railroad tracks. Or at some point, we did literally have a British commando dive through a window at somebody with a knife. That's fucking sweet. Even if you're playing the Germans, you're like, hell yeah. So like, I think it's just a fun game. And I think that's one of the fun parts about it is the person playing the Germans in 0200 Hours is supervising an algorithm. And so like, yeah, a lot of theirs is like, the dog's ears have pricked up? What happens next? So it is much more, I think, a collaborative storytelling game than a war game. Like I would never have a 0200 Hours tournament. That seems like the worst possible idea. On the other hand, a day of 0200 Hours hijinks sounds awesome.
Actually, kind of to like ad-lib a moment in here, a thing that I think we've both kind of landed on is tournaments are not our vibe as much, but events of like, we're going to do a bunch of these games is our vibe.
Yep. I love events. I have zero interest in competitive gaming. It's just not my scene at the moment. If it is your scene, that's awesome. That's great. Live your best life. It is just not the vibe I'm looking for. So since you have alluded to it, Calvin, we're going to do now is what we're going to do next year. You have a list that's twice as long as mine, which is probably correct. Do you want to start with what you want to be working on?
Yeah. So the top of the list is, because of some conversations we've had together, Epic Pike and Shot. I have a bunch of it built behind me on the shelf. I am pointing, which is great radio. But it's back there. They're built. I need to prime them all. I need to paint them all. It's going to be contrast, so I'm just going to like zone out for 3 hours and then like once I exit my fugue state, they'll be done. I also have a slightly less historical thing on here, but dwarves. Because, funnily enough, for people who know me, I've actually never finished a dwarven army for any system, and I want to change that. So I'm starting with like Saga Age of Magic, but the game that I'm really looking forward to with these guys is I want to do the new Midgard Heroic Battles game. I'm super excited about that one.
So I pre-ordered the book. The package came. I opened it very excitedly, and all I had was the measuring sticks. Emailed two Fat Lardies and was like, "Hey guys, is this coming in a separate box?" Because they're a small company and awesome. They were like, "That's not how that was supposed to be packed. We're going to send you another book." So I have finally managed to do a read through of Midgard. I think it's very neat. I think I'm often skeptical of very genericized rule sets. There's another one I bought that I can't even remember the name of that I bought, I read, and I was like, cool, I'm never going to play this.
DBA or something?
No, this was a one from a 3D printing company that was supposed to genuinely be like, that sort of like, you can play whatever you want. Like, do you want to play 100 Years War Knights versus Space Marines? You could totally do that. And I was like, But then they got real specific about units. And so it was just a bad scene. The point of this whole story was Midgard didn't do that. It very much felt like we have identified some things that make units feel a certain way. Put those on your units and they feel a certain way. And so I think that's done a very good job for me of sort of a generic rule set. And I am very interested in playing Midgard as well. I think this works for genuine out-and-out fantasy. I think this works for sort of Irish cattle raiding epics, Beowulf, etc., where you're like, yeah, so that's definitely not how that happened. I like the heroic aspect of it. I think a lot of games deliberately de-emphasize your general as a person and their ability to personally affect combat. Midgard is definitely like, yeah, no, fuck that. Achilles is Achilles. And so, like, I have seen it used for the Trojan War. Just brilliant. Because, like, what you actually need is a bunch of fights, and then you need Achilles to fight Hector. And, like, what actually wins this battle is that Achilles kills Hector. I love that. And that, like, there's some choices as to how you spend, how cool your guys are. So, yeah, I think Midgard's a really interesting game. I like the idea of it. So, yeah, we'll definitely play some of that.
Yeah. Anyway, after that quick, tangent, I want to finish my Zulus. They're built. They're all primed, they're like half painted, and I want to all finish painting them so I can have my Zulus done for any one of the things I do. We want to do Crusades at some point, because I have my Crusaders literally gathering dust on a shelf right now. I want to use them for something. So either Byzantines will appear, or Islamic forces will appear, and we'll do something fun with them.
I traipse ever closer to doing some Crusades, and at some point I'm just going to be like, Calvin, I've ordered some things.
Yeah. Another thing for us to do in our own shenanigans, I want to finish my Franco-Prussian War stuff so we can do the Franco-Prussian War as our most, like, grognard bullshit that we can. Also on my list is I want to do a lot of terrain for all my stuff. Like, the list I wrote on my phone has 3 tables of terrain, at least. There might be a 4th in there that I want to finish and have done. Like, one of them is the Rohan in front of me. That also, like, if you squint slightly, it'll work fine for, like, Anglo-Saxon or Viking stuff.
Yeah.
I'm not going to be using a ton of the horse heads. But yeah, and also I want to expand my desert forces for World War II, because I want to run around in the desert and do more random stuff.
That makes sense to me. And yeah, I think a lot of that terrain is really cool. And importantly, a lot of what you're interested in is moving out of what if we just play in Northern Europe. And so I think that there's a fair amount of, yeah, but we need our terrain to look slightly different. In the back of my mind at some point, I am aware I am going to do Italy. Italy has been fought over a lot.
There's a whole series of wars about it.
Yeah. So there's definitely I'm going to do some some villas with grapevines and whatnot. That's definitely in there. So I like some good purpose-built terrain now that we've got the sort of load-bearing stuff done. On my end, I have sort of two major goals and a sort of minor goal. The minor goal, which I'm going to do first, is I've got some lingering projects that I want to be done. The astute listener will realize these were also last year's goals. So that's where we're at right now with Hobby Progress, is revisiting last year's goals. I've got a half-painted Cruel Seas fleet, and some of a painted Danish force for 7 days to the River Rhine. I should just finish those. Literally, for the Danes, we're talking about, like, paint 4 leopard ones. Paint the stupid leopard ones. For Cruel Seas, I hammered out a bunch of just little gunboats in, like, a weekend, and then just completely lost momentum because of a couple things, like one of the ships had a big miscast on it that had to get renewed, and then I just got busy, etc., etc. I just want to be done with that. I want to be like, this is my alternate history Irish Navy force for Cruel Seas, and it's finished. Mm-hmm. And then if they come out with something cool, cool. If they don't come out with anything cool anymore, also fine. So those are the two sort of...
Campbelltown is not in that pile of...
I mean, the Campbelltown is in that pile.
Oh,
like, there's several big ships in there, but they'll paint up fast too. So I'm not painting the crews. I refuse to glue the little crewmen onto the boats. But the two sort of major historical projects I want to work on this year are Epic Pike and Shot, just because that box is sort of burning a hole in my closet of opportunity. I think it'll paint up pretty fast. I want to play that game, etc., etc. I have it sort of prepped. I've got everything off sprues and ready to be painted. I just need to do it and get going. I've got some stuff about possibly 3D printing the bases for it because I don't like how the bases are done. But that, again, is like me spending a couple hours in Tinkercad and figuring this out. And the other thing is, as mentioned, Saga. We'll talk about it in the next segment, but Chaboy is going to need some Saga forces. I've got 3 Viking warbands, an Anglo-Saxon warband, well, 3 some sort of Viking. What'll probably be is Viking, and then I can't remember what the force for it is, but it's the Galo-Norse. I've got the makings of an Irish warband, etc. I've got a lot of Saga guys. I would like to both have those Saga guys be armies I can play, and then also have those Saga forces be armies other people can play. And so that brings us to some of our plans for this coming year.
This time, they're actually the same theme, unlike last year, where we did, What a Stormtrooper and then D-Day. This time, both of them are Viking raids of some kind. So one of our local colleges, the University of Idaho, has a Vandal Overnight or Vandal Games Con convention that they run, like a one-day convention.
Yeah, basically it's towards but not right at finals. It's got a lot of there's free pizza, there's an esports tournament, there's a bunch of board games, things like that. A lot of local people come together, and it's just college students relaxing before things get real busy real fast. This is what we did for What a Stormtrooper. Is we decided to do a Gemo Dame for this. The club generally also runs a 40K event. This year, we're going to try to do Raven's Feast, which is a rule set expressly designed to get people into wargaming. And so we're going to do the classic, oh no, Vikings are raiding an Anglo-Saxon town. What do? And so we're going to do that. And then the more grand idea, which is why we're doing the same thing, is so that we can build off of and spend all 6 months working on one thing rather than three-month chunks frantically working on 2 things, is a multiplayer Saga event this summer. That is the same thing. The idea is it's a Viking raid, except for this is hopefully a 6-player Saga event, 3 on each side, involving an 8x4 table with, I have now custom digitally kit bashed coastal tiles that we're going to have as the Viking sort of starting area, is boats run up on the coast. This should be very cool. I would like to have this fully painted when we do it, because that will also give our club all the Dark Ages terrain we will need
Forever.
and just be like, okay, we can put together an 8x4 terrain dense table. No one is ever going to do that again. Ta-da! And so that's the second scenario. We're going to do that again in June, which is the many hundredth year anniversary of the raid at Lindisfarne. Because apparently things just happen in June. It turns out the middle of what was historically campaign season has a bunch of stuff happen in it.
Surprise.
We're also going to try to record more.
Sorry, guys.
We appreciate that it's hard to get really involved in a podcast that doesn't record very much. And so we're going to try to do that more. This is part of Eric's greater work-life balance initiative. So yeah, hopefully we'll be recording more. And then, Calvin, what's the other thing we want to do?
We want to play more with tiny mans, not just little mans.
Yeah.
Like specifically, Eric pointed out that he wanted this to be the year of the tiny men's.
Yeah, this is what I've been referring to as the year of the tiny men's, which just means things that are smaller than 28 millimeter.
Because the other big, like, non-historical project that we both are kind of interested in is we're both poking around at Legions Imperialis. So
yeah, I played one game of that with my brother, loved it, and was like, oh no, all these little tanks I have, I might need to paint. So
and
yeah,
also like whenever the 10 mil Wargames Atlantic Agincourt comes out, we're gonna give
that's gonna be a thing.
That a shot.
Yeah, that's definitely gonna be a thing.
Yeah.
Sort of rounding this out, for me, this year was a rough year for hobby-related work, but I'm at peace with that. I have been ruminating on writing an article for Variance Hammer called essentially Reflections on Failure. And it is just like, yeah, like life got in the way, and that's okay. That's what life is. My job is going well. We adopted a dog. The world is fine. But it did slow down painting.
Adopted a very cute dog.
Yes. Della, aka Della Duck, aka the Comtesse von Kennard, is a adorable creature, but she is currently in the puppy monster age group where she's essentially a teenager. I'm looking for that phase to be done.
And to kind of sum up my year, I kept getting grabbed by different ideas, and then I did them. So all my long-term projects, like my big Roman army, my big other Napoleonic armies, kind of got put to the side because I was just doing all these other weird small projects, like, oh no, Gangs of Rome might show up next year. Oh no, Guards of Traitors Toll is like the exact game I want to play. Things like that.
Yeah, you have been struggling with things that would require like 6 months of concentrated effort.
Yeah, which is kind of my whole thing. Like, because like last year, I did one really big project of my 28 mil French Napoleonics, and that broke me a little. Like,
yeah,
holy crap.
Yeah, so thinking about that, we'll figure that out going forward. Similarly, I am braced for my credit card got charged for Port Royal, which means they're starting fulfillment. And
we're gonna have to try that out, aren't we?
And Pirate Mordheim is extremely my jam, and so I'm kind of prepped for like, okay, all of these goals were cute. Meanwhile,
pirate time.
So I am a little bit braced for that in my soul. So yeah, we're gonna have to try that out. But then, what were really, I think, the highlights of our year?
Number one, what a Stormtrooper. We did so much with it. We had a lot of fun putting it together, talking about it. It's probably the game we talked about the most. Like,
yeah,
it was such a great thing to get people interested.
Yeah,
and I'm really happy we did it. The table looks nice. The
table looks nice. It was a lot of fun. It was a fun project to, as you said, like talk about, be like, okay, what do we want these guys to be able to do? How do we translate their weird disruptor guns into, is this a pistol? Finally, with it, I think it did validate our ability to do an event.
Yeah.
In a way that I think encouraged us to do more. And I think that that's really cool. To be like, oh, we could do this, and it's not a shit show. Awesome. I think the highlight of the year for me was yesterday. We played, if you can't tell, we played sort of a surge of Pikelands and Blank games, And that was mostly because I wanted to reach a good stopping point before we started focusing on projects for this year, playtesting Raven's Feast, things like that.
Baron's War.
Baron's War. So that was Major Skarsgård going out with a narrative bang. We had sort of 3 really good sort of linked games in a row that felt good, that built on each other, and that got him, thank God, because I was positive he was going to die in the last couple games. Got him to Colonel. He's done. I have not been working on a command base for him because I've been very superstitious that the moment I did that, he would die, and then I would feel not okay with representing him in another system. So he is off to be a Colonel, and he gets to do Colonel-y things, and I can make narrative bases for him for larger scale games and narrative bases for him for smaller scale games. And so I just like that sort of a good end note of like January 1st, wrap it up.
Mm-hmm.
And wrapped it up in a game that I thought was a lot of fun. And both armies sort of did what they were supposed to do.
That's another thing I was going to point out is we did not play a bad game the entire year. There was no game where we're like, man, I'm not happy we did that.
Yeah.
Like, the closest we got was maybe Devilry Afoot.
And that was, I think, both of us going, we really need to figure out how, like, I don't understand the tempo of this game.
Yeah.
And then I played a solo game of it and had a good time. I would say either that one or the What a Tanker. And even that was hilarious, just because at some point your luck is so bad that you're just like, all right, like, let's just see where this goes. And so, yeah, every game we played was fun. There was I never felt that we had wasted a couple hours.
Yeah.
And that's a very welcome feeling. So speaking of wasting a couple hours, we're at the end of our show notes for this. So this is a short episode-ish for us. Thank you all for joining us. We do have a couple things to sort of reach out to you guys, be a little more active. We have a Patreon. We haven't recorded in a while, so nothing has been doing with that Patreon, but we are on Patreon at patreon.com/plasticpressgangpodcast. That helps us pay for our lovely editor who makes our words sound better.
Which, slight side note, bless you, Adrian. Thank you for checking on us to make sure we're still alive and like not hating each other.
Yeah, Adrian sent me a very kind DM that was like, are you guys still recording? And I was like, yes, we are. I'm very sorry. So yes, thank you, Adrian. We also have a Discord. Shoot us either an email at plasticpressgang@gmail.com or leave a comment with us on YouTube or the various social media sites. I am no longer on the Hateful Bird site, but I am on Blue Sky at Variance Hammer. Calvin, how can folks reach you?
I am technically on both the Hateful Bird site and Blue Sky. I never look at the Hateful Bird site anymore, and I don't even know what my username is on Blue Sky. So you can find me either on Discord in one of the various Discords I hang out in, Lost to the Nails. You can find me in like the Turnip Discord.
Yeah, similarly, I hang out on Goonhammer's Discord, the Lost to the Nails Discord, the 40K Badcast Discord, the Independent Characters Discord. I think all of these under Variance Hammer Eric. So there's lots of ways to find us, to get an invite to our Discord. And also an invite to the Discord is part of Patreon. So you'll automatically get invited if you do a Patreon subscription.
Oh yeah, also you can find me on Twitch occasionally, where I'm going to be painting toy soldiers. Or occasionally I'm clicking on heads or playing other weird games. Helldivers has taken over a chunk of my life, so I might have to start streaming that.
All right. Thank you all very much. Have a good beginning of 2025, and we will hopefully see you soon.